Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us on this important meeting. Good to see your face back. It has been a while. I hope all of you are okay.
Yes, thank you.
Good, good. I think we will have to start the meeting at the moment. So yeah, as you all know that I am the host of today's meeting. My name is Mr. Usman Gay, the Community Development Worker for Family Voice Peterborough. I'm here with my colleague Judita, the parent rep for Family Voice Peterborough. Yeah. First of all, can I remind you all that we will be recording today's meeting and it can be accessed via Facebook and YouTube pages for Family Voice. Yeah, the main purpose of the meeting is to talk about exclusion today. We have a wonderful speaker by the name Dr. Tony Bailey, the Assistant Director for SEN and Inclusion. Dr. Tony will provide an overview of the local functions process regarding exclusion from educational settings. This will include an outline of what constitutes an exclusion for a fixed term and permanent period, what the role of the school settings are, and consideration into the use of the reduced times tables when supporting children and young people. After the presentation, you will be given the floor to ask questions. Yeah. So at the moment, Dr. Tony is over to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. I'm not a doctor, but some people might regard me as being magical in some areas, but not.
Yeah, sorry about that, because according to your name, they put DR, Dr. Tony. So,
Did they?
Yes, definitely, yes. Yeah. I do apologize for that if that's anything,
No worries, no worries. Quite funny. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a presentation. The presentation is going to take you through some of the legal aspects, as well as some of the expectations that you should have in terms of what exclusion process should be like and should entail. There'll be questions at the end. However, if you've got any questions as we're going through, please feel free just to raise your hand and we can answer them as we go through. It's quite a long presentation. We've got a lot to go through. Normally, we would do training on exclusion, and it would take most of a day to go through all of the details. So I will fly over some things that you might want to look at in your own time. But I've shared some links for for the legal aspects in particular, if you wanted to go down that route. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so you can see my presentation. Let's see. Okay, can you see that?
Of course, yes.
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 Thank you.
Okay, let's try from the beginning. Okay, how's that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to provide a guide to exclusion, but we have been changing the language across Peterborough and in Cambridgeshire to try and talk about inclusion rather than exclusion. And exclusion is a tool that schools will use and other settings will use to support inclusive practice. And we're moving away from punitive exclusion and to only using exclusion when we see it as a positive impact, i.e. to include the children more effectively. So it can be a valuable tool, but does need to be used in the right way. And we want to do it in a way that makes sure that people feel they're part of a system rather than fighting against it. So we're going to highlight inclusion quite a lot in the presentation. Okay, so let's start from the legal perspective. There is a legal requirement that schools and settings have to be aware of. And these are the legal documents that are relevant. School discipline, pupil exclusions and reviewed regulations, 2012. So they've not changed since then. They've been with us for quite some time. And then there's statutory guidance that all maintained schools, academies, and pupil referral units in England need to use. So it's different in Scotland and it's different in Wales, but for England, we've got a very stable and very detailed piece of statutory guidance that outlines what schools should and shouldn't do. We'll go through those elements in this presentation. An important element is the Equalities Act 2010, which head teachers need to and leaders of settings need to consider when considering exclusions. And also quite recently new are the Mental Health and Behaviour in Schools guidance. That's a guidance document. What's really important to understand is that everything also applies to sixth form. So all the same issues and the same expectations should be in place for children who are 16 and above. We also have some local guidance for Peterborough, which we've just developed, very new, it's just come out, and we've shared it with all of the schools and settings to outline exactly what we expect in Peterborough should be happening in school. And that basically brings together all of those legal documents into a local format. So, basic standards, school policies. Schools should have a duty to promote safeguarding and welfare of pupils, and that should be outlined in their policy. Schools also have a duty to ensure they have that written policy and that policy supports good behaviour, and crucially, that the policy is effectively implemented, i.e. it needs to be a realistic policy and it needs to be a policy that they can show that they can implement properly. The policy should be available on the school's website, or if parents don't have access to the internet, then they should be able to provide a copy to parents if they request one. So, you know, that's a right for every parent who attends any school or setting to know what that policy is. The policy should set out consequences and sanctions to be adopted if the school behaviour discipline policy, sometimes it's called behaviour, sometimes it's called discipline policy, sometimes we would hope, and we're hoping that most of them will change to call them inclusion policies, because we hope that that is a better way forwards. The school should keep comprehensive records of all of these consequences once they're put in. So if they do something to impact upon a child as a part of their policy, it should be fully recorded and official. So schools should also address safeguarding issues as outlined in the DfE document, Keeping Children Safe in Education, which is like the Bible for safeguarding, which you can find online. And that includes day-to-day conduct on site, circumstances when children will act on issues off school site. Sometimes schools can act and provide support with the children when they are acting inappropriately off school site or in the evenings or weekends and stuff, but they need to make sure that that's outlined in the policy if they do that. Sexual misconduct, cyberbullying, all of those things that are listed there are connected to keeping children safe in education. What the policy shouldn't do is have a complete list or a limited list. They should say, here are some examples of what we would act to support, and that, you know, there could be other areas that they need to act on. So all policies will say, here is an example, but not a full list. It should be reviewed regularly by the senior leadership team, head teacher, and the governing body. We need to make sure that it's up to date. And teachers are able to utilise the policy, but only the head teacher is legally allowed to issue a term or permanent exclusion. So the head teacher would be the person who would sign that off. Okay, so there are different types of exclusions. There's a fixed term exclusion and there's a permanent exclusion. So we'll just go through what those are, just to be clear. So a fixed term exclusion is an exclusion that is for a fixed number of days. The length should be proportionate to allow the school to review appropriate next steps and to focus on how to best reintegrate that pupil. So if it would take 1 or 2 days in order for the school to do what they need to get that child back into school, then that should be the appropriate length of the fixed term exclusion. However, sometimes they need longer, and depending on the circumstances, they will be measuring what they need to do. But the focus should be on the reintegration of the pupil. Parents and carers must be notified on the same day. That would usually be by telephone, or in some circumstances by text or email if those arrangements are agreed. But a written and detailed letter should be sent by the head teacher as soon as possible afterwards. They normally would write on the same day and post it. That would detail the reasons and the length, and also the date that the pupil would come back to school. If pupils are at home or excluded for more than 5 days, i.e. by the 6th day, full-time equivalent education needs to be provided. However, it's good practice for work to be sent home from day one, although they don't need to, that's not statutory. Governors should also be informed and be fully aware of the exclusions as well. The number of days a pupil can be excluded on a fixed term exclusion cannot exceed a cumulative number of 45 days. That means in any one whole year, you can't exclude a child for more than 45 days. If you go over 45 days, then you have to consider whether permanent exclusion is considered appropriate. All exclusions, even for any length of time, must be recorded officially. You can't send a child to school off and not record that as an exclusion. And if you send a child home at lunchtime, you have to record that as a half-day exclusion, and you must have the information sent to the parents and a letter detailing that exclusion in the same way as any other exclusions. If children are sent home to cool off without it being recorded, that would be deemed an illegal exclusion, and that is not okay. That is not all right, and we've gone to great lengths in Peterborough to make sure that our schools and settings fully understand that. So we basically, if the child is not at school because they've been sent home, it must be recorded and it must be officially agreed. Fixed term exclusion cannot be extended or transferred into permanent exclusion. So sometimes, in some circumstances, there'll be incidents that children will get involved with that will require some additional investigation. If that investigation is required, you can send a letter home, or the head teacher could send a letter home to explain that whilst we're investigating this, we may extend this exclusion for a further time, i.e. extend the number of days required for the fixed term exclusion, or we may extend, or we may transfer it into a permanent exclusion if we have additional evidence. However, that needs to be outlined in the original letter. They can't change their minds once they've sent the letter out. The letter must detail that we are thinking about gathering further information, and that they will get in touch with you to understand whether or not it would be extended or the possibility of it turning into a permanent exclusion. It's not legal to send a letter out to say the child will be excluded for 3 days and be back on a date, and then when that 3rd day comes, they say, no, we've changed our mind, it's now a permanent exclusion. That cannot happen, and the child should go back to school in those circumstances, and they would need to wait until the next incident if they wanted to do anything. Hopefully there wouldn't be one. If a school does undertake an investigation, they do have a duty to do that. They have to think about all the circumstances and consider whether there was any mitigating or aggravating issues. They would need to investigate the needs. It would need to be a balanced and fair and based on facts, the investigation. The legal test for a school is on the balance of probabilities, which is different to the criminal standard. I.e., you know, we need to be in a criminal court, then you would need to be beyond reasonable doubt that something had happened. However, within a school, the test is the balance of probabilities, which means that having given consideration to all of the circumstances, it is more likely than not that something has happened. That's an important thing, because sometimes parents and carers get frustrated because there isn't beyond reasonable doubt, and that it could, it's not completely proved, but in the balance of probabilities is what schools have been instructed to do within the investigation. Pupils should be consulted about their views. if it's safe to do so, sometimes a child will be removed from site if they're not being safe, and it may not be appropriate to ask them what their view is on that particular time before the exclusion, but it would be good practice to, when things have calmed down and in the right time and space, go back to the pupils and consider what their view would be. The more serious the consequence, the more robust the evidence needs to be. I think that's obvious. And CCTV can be used as evidence, but schools and settings must ensure that they've shared a privacy notice with parents and carers. And that usually will be as part of the policies, the behaviour inclusion policy. There will be a section in there if CCTV is available. Lots of schools do now have CCTV, especially covering outdoor areas. And some schools will have CCTV that covers corridors. And there are not many schools, or there shouldn't be schools that have CCTV in classrooms, but some do. The other type of exclusion is a permanent exclusion, which means that the child has been excluded and will not be permitted to come back to school. In order for a permanent exclusion to be legal and be appropriate, there's a two-limb test that needs to be satisfied by the head teacher. The first of those is the incident needs to be in response to a serious breach or persistent breaches of the behaviour, discipline or inclusion policy. The second test is where allowing the pupil to remain in school would be harmful to the educational welfare of pupils or of others, including teachers, or any member of staff, or even the public who might have access to the school. So if those two tests can be met, then a permanent exclusion would be deemed illegal. Illegal. Head teachers also have to consider the identified elements in the statutory guidance. So before they can do or undertake a permanent exclusion, they need to consider whether there was any unmet needs. That they could be possibly unidentified learning or SEND needs. And if they do identify those, then they should be considering not to permanently exclude and indeed to meet those needs, if at all possible. They should consider specifically pupils with SEND and or education, health and care plans. If they have SEND or they have educational health and care plans, they need to be fully considering whether or not those needs have been met and whether they've been a contributing factor to the incident in any way. However, there is a section that people with EHCPs cannot be permanently excluded. That's not true, because if we go back to the two-limb test, if it would be safer or unsafe for that child to be on site, then there's still a legal ability to do that. But we would hope that there would be more consideration in those circumstances. We need to look at mitigating circumstances both at school and in the home environment. Special consideration for children who are looked after, and also groups who have disproportionately high rates of exclusion, which might include children from the traveller background, children who come from other communities that are, like children of colour, particularly nationally, Afro-Caribbean boys have got disproportionately high rates of exclusion, not so much in Peterborough, pleased to say. Where the behaviour has been persistent, the school should be able to outline what interventions have been implemented. I mean, persistent means it's been going on for a long time. If it's been going on for a long time and it's continued, then the school should be able to demonstrate what they've done about it. I.e., they should be able to say what other agencies have been involved, whether the LA has been informed and asked for support, and whether alternative provision has been consulted and considered. So where it's for persistent reasons, there is another level of consideration in terms of making sure that the school have done something about it, not just at the end, but through that process. More considerations, you need to apply with the SEND Code of Practice, the Equalities Act, the duty to make reasonable adjustments for disabled children, and also ensure that off-rolling is not taking place. Off-rolling is a practice that Ofsted are really, really keen on breaking down, and that is taking children off-roll at the school before vital tests or data can be recorded that would impact on the school. So if there is any suggestion that children would be being taken off the roll at a convenient time from school, then that would need to be considered and not allowed. So again, a letter needs to be included for a permanent exclusion. And in the permanent exclusion letter, the full details and the reasons for the permanent exclusion, sometimes called a text, by the way. We need to outline the 2 limb tests have been satisfied with details around that. Include any details of any investigations and mitigating factors, and also outline the next steps, including the governing body review and their opportunity, and parents and carers' opportunity to provide representation. And obviously, your views as a parent and carer would need to be included. Let me move on to the governing body review. So the permanent exclusion can only be finalised following a review and agreement by the governing body in the school and setting. The head teacher is the only person who can suggest that it happens, but it can only be finalised following the governing body's agreement or review. The job of the governing body review is to challenge and ask questions to support a fair and thorough process, make sure that investigations have occurred, make sure all of the legal elements are in place. They should also consider representations from parents and the head teacher, and if it's a maintained school, i.e. run by the local authority would also attend to give their view of the situation. What they can do is they can decide to reinstate the pupil if they feel that there wasn't a good or there wasn't enough information in terms of the exclusion, or they can decline to reinstate them and agree with the teacher's decision. That would then go on. Areas that they need to consider, the quality of the evidence, make sure that there's been a fair and balanced approach and that witnesses were spoken to, the children who were involved, their views were held, and the teachers and every party need to make sure it's a proportionate response. Throwing a pencil on the floor would not necessarily be a good enough reason for a permanent exclusion, for example. Alternative strategies, if this was again a part of a persisting kind of behaviour, what would the school done about it over time? At the setting in a position to support and use other services. It's particularly important that the disciplinary committee consider issues relating to disability, SEND, race, children in need, and looked after children. These are all protected characteristics, if you like, that we need to be really careful about. Again, permanent exclusion can happen for any of the children who fall within those categories, but it should be of a last resort. And then they just decide whether or not to uphold the head teacher's decision, and whether or not they do, or whether or not they send the pupil back to school. If they do uphold the decision, parents can request an independent review, but they must do so within 15 days. So an independent panel, the independent panel review, the panel will be individuals who are not connected to the school or the setting in any way, and they'll be asked to look through the detail. The parents have a right to an independent review of the governor's disciplinary committee, so they can ask for that. Again, it needs to be within 15 days. The chair of the disciplinary committee would need to attend in order to justify the decision to permanently exclude. So the chair would be there. Parents will also be asked to attend, and they can, if they want, they don't have to, but they can, if they want, bring legal representation. It is representation, though. It's not. There's no legal basis for anybody to go and make things happen. They'll be just there to support. It's held within 15 days of disciplinary committee meeting. If you leave it longer, then I'm afraid you can't do anything about it. Following the review, the panel can do a number of things. They can either uphold the governing body's decision and agree with it, or recommend that the governing body reconsiders reinstatement. I disagree and ask them to think about it again. They can quash the decision and direct the governor to reconsider the reinstatement. However, the governing body does not have to reinstate. The duty is for them to reconsider following this. It may well be that the independent review suggests that reconsidering the situation is important, but the governing body will go through the process and record and may reconsider it, but still come to the same result. That is because the health and safety element of it, the responsibility for health and safety falls broadly on the shoulders of the governing body. So if they feel that it wouldn't be safe to have a child return to school, they would need to consider that and very carefully indeed. There are other forms of exclusion. Reduced timetables. So a reduced timetable is, we have a statutory requirement to provide 25 hours of education for all children. If a child is on 24 hours, then they're on a reduced timetable. If they're on 24.5 hours, they're on a reduced timetable, and that needs to be recorded. A reduced timetable can only happen if parents are in full agreement, and if they sign their agreement, there must be a signed agreement with parents to undertake that, and it must also be reviewed regularly, at least every 6 weeks. However, we've recommended as good practice in our exclusion guidance that review should happen every 3 weeks. The idea being that hopefully that children over time will be able to increase their time back into full-time education. There must also be a risk assessment, and that risk assessment will talk about how the child will be supported when he's not in school, what level of support and work will be provided, and what level of support will be provided to the parents in terms of checking and visiting in order to make sure that people remain safe. And it can never be offered in the place of a full fixed term or a permanent exclusion, i.e. we shouldn't be in conversations to say, well, either we have a reduced timetable or your child will be excluded. A reduced timetable can be and is a really effective way of supporting young people who are going through a crisis situations. However, it should be for a limited period of time, and it should be over a structured period of time that is fully reviewed and builds on the time so the children come back into education. For some children who are highly anxious, going into school all day, every day can be very, very difficult for them. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to listen to those children and be sensitive and have empathy for those needs. However, we do have an entitlement, and we do have to think about how we record those things and how we support it. I've put elective home education. It's not really a form of exclusion. However, just to be aware that if you choose to go down electively home education as a route for your child, there is now a new stipulation that you must have a conversation with the school. And schools should never ever say that electively home education is an alternative to a permanent exclusion. And we know that has happened nationally. We don't know if that's happened in Peterborough, but we know nationally that sometimes head teachers will say, have you ever considered teaching from home instead of being in school? That's not legal. That's not okay. We wouldn't encourage that. So we just want to make it aware that, where that's being suggested, it shouldn't be in place of any form of exclusion. This is quite a complicated map, which would take us hours to go through. This is our travel map for inclusion, which I'm just sharing with you. Basically, it shows you that we've got 3 levels of support that goes through that. So before we get to permanent exclusion, all of this should be happening. And here, we've got permanent exclusion down here, and then we've got the governor's issues around there. So there are 3 levels of support that come in, and we have individual alternative education plans that should be in place. Then we've got the multi-agency support group, the maths group, and we've got the behaviour panel in Peterborough, and we've also got support from the PRU, all in place before permanent exclusion. So this is all part of the Peterborough support mechanisms that are in the exclusion guidance. Just to kind of show you, and this, I can it would take quite a long time to go through the different detail in that, but just wanted to share that with you so you were aware of what that we've got a robust approach to try and provide as much support as possible. However, exclusions do happen in Peterborough, and permanent exclusions do happen too, but we are reducing those over time. The new inclusion approach is so far been received very positively with schools and settings, and we're hoping to continue to work towards that because Peterborough has in the past had quite high levels of exclusion, which we knew that we needed to deal with. Okay, so that's a very, very quick shoot through what should we do. I hope it wasn't too quick, too fast, but happy to take any questions, or we can have some comments and discussion. Anything that you want more clarity over, I'm happy to do that. Osman.
Yeah, Tony, thank you very, very much. I got some of the members asking if there are any possibility that we can get the presentation and email it to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there, so I'll share that with family and get them so that she can share that.
Yeah. If you could email it to the Judith so that she will be able to email it everyone. Is that all right for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Judith, can you send your email to Tony, please, if you don't mind? Should I see?
Yes, I will even chat area my email.
Yeah. All right. If anybody has a question, please, you can come forward and ask. Yeah, before Tony move on.
My name is Elsie Ryan, and I was when children are excluded and they are, on the education, I think while they're excluded, the lessons sent home with them because they will be back behind, So I was wondering when any exclusion, whether it's 2 or 3 days, they're entitled to get a lesson or they will be back behind to catch up with other children.
Sorry, I didn't get all of that.
We haven't got your question very well. It's not clear, honestly. If you could repeat your question so that Tony will be able to, hear you very well, please.
Yes, I was saying, when children get excluded from school, is it important for them to get their lesson to take home with them? That they could know that is not a holiday, they just excluded, but they need to catch up with the other children in school with their lesson.
Yes, and as I said, good practice, good schools and settings, what they will do is they will send work home with them on the same day.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Well,
but the statutory requirement is after on the 6th day. From the 6th day, we need to be providing, full-time education for children who are out of school, so they can't be allowed to fall behind. That's exactly why that's in the statute, in the law, So, but that of course we can send work home and we can provide opportunities, but sometimes children find it difficult to engage with it fully because they're feeling, they're feeling the impacts of being excluded. We need to be aware of that, so we can't.
That is why it's good when all the children get together, because if they're struggling with their lesson and things like that, they could ask the teacher. But as parents, sometimes, they come home with the lesson and they put it aside. And we as parents have a responsibility that we have to make sure of the right to be excluded. But some parents don't want to encourage their children, so sometimes they, blame the school and things like that. But we as parents have a responsibility to see that our children go forward.
Yeah, and I would hope that, school settings will have relationships in place to support parents to be able to do that, because it's a difficult situation when, throughout any exclusion period, and there needs to be relationships in place between the school and parents to be able to work through that in partnership.
And children with learning difficulties, as parents, we should be able to let the government know, because sometimes children go to the mainstream school and is struggling, and they will bring it down to behavioral problem. You know, you're supposed to be able to open up and say what the child is doing at home. But sometimes when they go to school, there is change, and you know, they put it down to behavioral problem. You see, nobody knows that that child is struggling whatsoever. That is why parents and staff supposed to be able to come together to have any issues with their children to let the staff know what's going on. Communication.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Phyllis, thank you so much. I'm encouraging everyone to ask a question because this is very, very important topics, and Tony got everything available for us anyway. So I know we will share it to all of you, but anyway, honestly, if you have any question, please come forward and ask. I can see Faye, you have a question, please. If you could.
Yes, please. Hello, Tony.
Hi.
I'm currently quite anxious about my son. He's at a local school that's had quite a few exclusions recently. And my son is termed as high risk at the school. And obviously he's anxious because one or two of his friends have been excluded. I was just wondering, it might be
Sorry,
a bit...
one second. Sorry. I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
Can I just come back to you in 1 second? There's something happening outside.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
And Usman, after the Faye, we have question from Jason. So yeah, will be.
Yeah, if you flag your hands, you know, there is a place that you just flag, you raise your hand, then I'll be able to see that you'll be asking a question.
No, Jason, he left his question in the chat. You know, so.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. I can see it. Yeah, thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jason, after will be the question.
Yes, after Faye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jelida. Thank you.
Stanley.
Network.
Thank you. Very sorry, Faye. Sorry, please repeat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my son is currently at a local school, which has recently had quite a few exclusions, and a couple of those children like a group of his friends. So he's actually termed as high risk. So I'm just a bit anxious if his behaviours are going to lead to this. And I was just wondering what my first port of call would, who to contact to help me if this does happen.
So I mean, it's really good that you're kind of thinking ahead of possibilities that are happening, and you obviously know your child more than anybody else. And if you think that his anxiety is going to lead to behaviours that are going to be challenging to the school, then I would go and speak to the Senko first at the school.
Right, I have mentioned the school. I've phoned them every day this week because of his anxiety. And also, if he is permanent, if it does go to the worst case scenario and he is excluded, are they able to then find another school?
Yeah, we would look to as soon as possible to place him into another school. When children are excluded, does he have an educational health and care plan?
He does, yeah.
So we'd act fairly quickly to identify that. We'd also be working directly when the school should let us know when they're considering any level of exclusion if there's an educational health and care plan involved.
Right.
And at that point, we would be involved in working with the school to find alternatives, to see what support we can put into the school to help them and try and avoid a permanent exclusion. We know that a change of environment for children with educational health and care plans, or for all children, but particularly for children with educational health and care plans, is extremely damaging. So we would try to do what we could to keep them in the same place and keep a level of consistency, unless it was completely necessary to change. But if it is needed to be changed, then we'd be working quickly to identify another provision as soon as possible. Is it a mainstream or a special school?
No, he's a special school in Peterborough.
Right.
Which took me 4 years to fight to get him into that school. And like I say, there's been a lot going on, and he's just really anxious because it's like a it's one of his main friends that's been excluded, and I can just see his anxiety heightening, and they're talking about his behaviour. So I'm just getting anxious that it might boil to a point.
So just offer, you know, and go back to the school and offer to support them directly. And like I said before, there should be a partnership arrangement in place. If you're seeing those signs of anxiety, then, you know, writing to the school and saying you're willing to work with them. I guess that if it got to the you know, the governor's meeting or an independent review, if it got to the worst case scenario, that kind of written record of you offering to support, and potentially if the school, I would hope the school wouldn't ignore that, but if they did ignore that, it wouldn't go in their favour, I wouldn't have thought.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jason, it's over to you, please.
Thank you, Yvonne. Hi, Tony. Just asking, I just saw the legal document that the thing that you showed us. Why isn't the DDA involved in that as well? Discrimination Act, when it comes to SEN or exclusions. Surely there is a legal right that it should be.
No, that's a good point, and I think it's probably inferred within the Children's Act and the SEN Code of Practice, because that's part of the SEN Code of Practice. But it's inferred through that.
Right, and also the strategy on the thing that you showed us, the diagram for a parent, that looks very, very, very confusing, especially if it's been sent to them. That's not
the parent version. That's the
no, but that's fine then. I was going to say, because if it was, that looked very, very confusing.
So we did an inclusion event for all schools and settings where we went through the individual steps, and it took us quite, you know, a number of hours to go through the individual steps to make it it is complicated. There is a lot of steps, but that's because we do a lot of work before we get to permanent exclusion. So we didn't want to miss any of the steps out. And if you go through the through the diagram, I've taken it off now, but if you go through the diagram, there is a way through, like you know, it does work in terms of you do this, then this, then this, then this. It's like a flow chart, yes and no at each stage. But you know, you're always in that situation where do you put all onto one page so everyone can see it and see what they should and shouldn't be doing, or do you present a longer piece of work that does the detail? Now we do both in the exclusion guidance for schools, but I appreciate that when you see that, it looks, we called it a travel map because it reminded us of the tube map in London. It's not complicated.
Right, yeah.
But that's because we want to include all the detail.
Right, okay.
That's it. Thank you, Jason. Any more questions before Tony move on? All right, Ryan. Yeah, I think Ryan got another question. You're more than welcome. Yeah, thank you. You mute your. Can you remove? Can you unmute yourself? We cannot hear, please.
Yeah, I was saying children with special needs. They're supposed to have one-to-one support to children.
The line is not very clear, honestly. I hardly hear from you, honestly. Sorry about that, Ryan. I don't know what's the problem. You know.
I was saying children with special needs, yeah?
Good. Yeah.
Yes. I think that they should be able to have one-to-one support. Because if they're in a mainstream school and not a special school and they're interrupting the other children, they're supposed to be able to have one-to-one support to assist with these children. And, you know, sometimes you put them in small groups to help with them because sometimes they're struggling and they get frustrated. That is when their behavior approach even worse. They feel like they're left alone.
So that obviously children who need one-to-one support, that will be identified and that support will be provided. We don't give that to everybody and we don't give it very often. And even when we do give one-to-one support, we move away from one-to-one support being there all of the time. That's because children need to be supported to be independent whenever possible. If we like Velcro somebody to a child and is there all of the time, we're not preparing them for adulthood. We're not preparing them for living independently later in life. You know, they need to be able to self-regulate themselves and sometimes self-soothe themselves to find a way forward.
Even they have learning difficulties, you need to make them independent, let them make themselves independent, safe for them, show them how to do stuff in the home and things like that. That if they go on their own, they will learn something. Not because, you know, they have learning difficulties or things like that. You have to train them up and, you know, teach them to do things to make them independent.
So effective one-to-one support is having the person there, supporting the community around them and being available when they need to step in, not to be sitting next to them all day long. That's not effective.
So, you know, you just put them in groups and you have a support with them and then you move on to the other level.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Any more questions? You can go. Any more questions? Tony, over to you then. Let's move on. Thank you.
Well, that's all I came to do. So, you know, I've got nothing more to say really on that.
All right. That's wonderful. I think it's Snow. Yeah, Snow.
Hello. I didn't give my question, but because I'm not sure if that's to Tony, but maybe he will know the answer. Who is dealing with children at home when they are at risk? Why I'm asking, because there is a child, Lithuanian family and child, who's all the time at risk and sometimes doesn't come to school because of parents, not because of any illness or something. And one school previously was informed, now she's going to another school and another school was informed, and we didn't get any response from the school. So I wanted to know who's dealing with that, because I called children's social care 4 times. Nobody's coming back to me. So maybe you can advise. Thank you.
So children's social care is who you should be calling. They are the people who would utilize that. I mean, schools do have a responsibility to ensure that children are safe, but they would make the same referral that you've done to social care if they felt it was outside of the school situation, within the family situation. So you could contact the school and ask the school to also make a referral. I mean, obviously, I can't comment on what they're doing, but you know, school do have a role to play. The school should be contacting a designated safeguarding lead or the DSL of the school. You know, you could ask who that is, share your concerns, and then they could make a referral as well, and that might support the process. But you know, social care are pretty good. They do get back, and they will do that normally.
No, they don't. And the teacher from the previous school, she contacted them as well, and nobody came back to her as well. So yeah, it goes on for a long time now. And the current school was contacted as well. So I was interested if they should let me know what is happening, or it's not their responsibility, you know, to assure me that something is happening, because I'm just a member of a community. I'm not a family member. Maybe that's why I don't know the outcome.
Yeah, they may not be able to tell you what's happened because of, you know, obviously it's you know, it's called GDPR in terms of data protection. So if something happens about a family, they need permission from the family to tell other people about it. So it may
understand, yeah, thank you.
But they're not able to tell you, unfortunately, because of protecting everybody. You know, people don't want other people to know stuff about them, and when they do, they need permission to go to share it.
Oh, of course they don't want. Of course they don't, because someone will do something and they don't want to do anything. Yeah, and this is what is really, really confusing, because, for example, myself, I don't know if I should keep, you know, talking to the social care and school, or I shouldn't, because something is happening, and that's where the confusion is.
Do you know what we say in terms of safeguarding is that if you feel that there's something to be said and you have a feeling that things are not happening, and you want to make a second referral, a third referral, a fourth referral, You should never feel uncomfortable about that. You shouldn't feel, nobody should be giving you any negativity about you raising the same issues again and again if you feel that they've still stayed around. I think that we've learned our lessons over the last 20 years, safeguarding, that we need community-minded people to be able to raise these things. And, you know, so you shouldn't feel there's no point in you doing that.
Thank you.
And there shouldn't be any negativity towards you if you do that.
Yeah,
Very good
you.
advice, Tony. Very good advice. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thank you so much, no, as well. Any more questions, please? Because it's very, very important for all of you to ask all the questions that you have, because Tony is here to help us. Please, can I ask everyone to come forward, please, to ask your question? Feel free. We still got time, please. Yeah, and your refreshment will be at your address very shortly. Yeah, you don't need to worry. Any more questions? Junita? Yeah.
I mean, there's an awful lot of information. I'll share the presentation, and it might be that you need to take the presentation, you need to kind of process it a little bit, think about it. If you need me to come back again, if you've got more questions, I'm more than happy to come to another session just for questions and conversation. Because I understand, you know, in half an hour, I've presented what I usually spend a day presenting. I rushed through it. So it's not a surprise to me that a little bit like,
yeah.
So please take the information. If you need me to return and have another conversation on more questions, I'm more than happy to do them.
All right. Maybe, yeah, maybe we have to ask parent carers just to take time to think, yeah. And if any questions, Tony, thank you that you are welcome to come back here to us. Yeah.
Yeah, Tony, Junita's email is on the screen. Is there any possibility that you can email her the presentation stuff, slides, so that she will be able to share it with everyone here?
I see her email in the chat. No worries.
Yeah, and also to other participants, if you have any questions or something, just contact me or Family Voice Peterborough general email, yeah, and just let us know.
Yeah, because this is a very, very important. I'm sure a lot of people were willing to join us today, but because of due to the lack of time and all those stuff, that's why they couldn't. But definitely, they will definitely need this information. Yeah. Yeah, if Judith can share it with everyone, that will be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and that was really useful. Thank you so much. It's very common, very common. Yeah, I go to schools to deal with exclusions very often. I'm interpreting and sometimes just go there as a member of community, and it's very important what you just raised today. Thank you so much for it.
Yes, you're doing a wonderful job. You're doing a wonderful job across the communities. Yeah, it's good. Like you, a person like you, to get all the information so that you'll be able to help others. Yeah, this is really important. Particularly, you can translate from English to your language for them to understand it very well. You know what I mean? Sure.
Yeah, so
thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much to everyone today attending our session. Thanks for your time. Yeah, and especially thanks to Tony for your very informational presentation. And also just a very kind reminder to everyone, please fill up the feedback form, because it is very important for us getting funding, supporting families. And also I would like to let you know that our next Seldom Heard Community Forum session, virtual session, preparing for adulthood, will be on Wednesday, 24th of November, the same time, 11 to 12:30. Also, we will have another session. It will be face-to-face session, foster care information and awareness event on 17th of November, 11 a.m. 1 p.m. at the Goldhay Community Community Center, so which is being held to raise awareness about becoming a foster care in Peterborough. We will be joined by professionals from Peterborough City Council, Kate Turner, Fostering Recruitment Officer, and hopefully you, Lucy Millington, Cambridge County Council. And the topic being discussed on that day will include what is foster caring, what is the process if you want to become a foster care, and the importance and benefits of the foster caring. So everyone also very welcome to attend. So thank you very much for today to everybody. Thanks.
Fantastic, Judita. I will also have to, I would just want to thank Suno for coming up with that fantastic topic anyway. So honestly, about foster care, I think a lot of people here, they don't understand the importance of foster care. So for her to come up with that idea, it is really commendable. Thank you so much, Suno. And Tony, honestly, you are wonderful, honestly. I benefited a lot from your presentation today, honestly speaking. So, and this is really, really useful to parents, carers, and that's why this information, we have to keep it in record and make sure that everybody get it. Yeah, thank you so much for having you here, and everyone on board. Thank you so much for joining us. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do these things. Thank you so much, million times. So I hope you had a fantastic session today. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy your refreshment. I know it's a little one, it's not in, but so I think you'll enjoy it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Osman. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.